Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of Kangaroo Court Uncut podcast. My name is Rob Cameron, and with me is the man that has started the Kangaroo Court of Australia, Shane Dowling. And Shane, a couple of topics we wanted to touch on today. Grace Tame back in the news again for, well, maybe not all the right reasons, and certainly some stuff still bubbling in the background about AUKUS, but definitely Grace Tame is the story of the week.
Certainly is. But before we get into that, I just wanted to mention the fact that I've been running a campaign over the last 20 odd weeks, trying to get 200 new monthly supporters, which helps fund the work I do and fund the growth of a small little media business, which includes this podcast. This is something new. And we've been trying to get 200 new monthly supporters. We're sitting at 179, 21 to go. So if you'd like to consider supporting my work and this podcast, etc., please listen to them, and I'll have more details then. But in relation to Grace Tame, she's been getting attacked by people, predominantly the Zionist Jewish community in Australia and also overseas, in fact, in relation to comments she made at a protest in February in Sydney, where she said globalised intifada. And there was a protest in relation to the Israeli President Herzog coming to Australia. There's no reason for him to ever come here. Israel has been accused by the United Nations of committing genocide in Gaza, and their Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, has an arrest warrant for war crimes. So, outstanding for him. So, there's no reason why Herzog should have come here. Saying globalised intifada is not illegal in New South Wales. So she hasn't committed a crime, but they've been attacking her relentlessly. One of the key drivers of that attack is a guy called Avi Yemeni. He's a fraudster and a scammer from Melbourne. He's been convicted of assaulting his ex-wife. He's killed, he shot people in Gaza. He openly admits that. He was in the Israeli Defence Force. He's Australian, but he went over there and joined the Defence Force, and he's admitted shooting people in Gaza. If he shot people, potentially he's killed people. And as we know, he's admitted shooting people who are throwing rocks. And as we know, a lot of those people throwing rocks are only children. So he's potentially shot and killed children. He blocked me on X when I asked him about it, so he doesn't want to answer too many questions about it. But he's one of the major drivers of attacking Grace Tame, and it's gone beyond attacking her or criticising her. It's getting to the point where it's absolutely stalking and harassment. Avi Yemeni, for example, set up a website or domain name. He registered a domain name, gracetame.com, had that redirected to a petition he set up to have her stripped of a Australian of the Year award she got in, I think it was 2021. So he just relentlessly attacking her. And there was a protest in Melbourne on Tuesday outside the ABC under the guise of defund the ABC. That was the main platform they were using to justify the protest. But as it turns out, it was pretty much just an anti-Grace Tame rally. And Gerard Henderson, Murdoch propaganda, said that. He called it a anti-Grace Tame protest. So that's been blown, that guise of trying to hide behind defund the ABC campaign, which is really nothing more than a Zionist campaign to attack the ABC and attack Grace Tame. Now, it was organised by Avi Yemeni and the Australian Jewish Association. They were there. Good chance they were part of the organising committee. And the reason it blew up and got media attention, them having 40 or 50 people outside the ABC, was never going to get much traction in the media. But one of the radio hosts, Charlie Pickering, walked outside, spoke to the protesters, spoke to Avi Yemeni, and said it was problematic that the ABC had employed or hired Grace Tame to do a 4-part podcast series on autism. Nothing related to Israel or Australian Jews or anything. They were complaining that the ABC had hired her on a totally unrelated matter. And Charlie Pickering said Avi Yemeni that was problematic. And that got a lot of attention nationally because he's basically attacked her. He's walked that back a few days later and said he was a big fan of Grace Tame, but the damage had been done. That's exactly what they wanted, is someone like Charlie Pickering to say something like that to help promote the anti-Grace Tame rally. They're also trying to badger the ABC not to um, run anything critical of Israel, and they didn't even try and hide that. So that's where we're at. And one of the things I found when I was investigating, and it's probably a big issue, well, it's not probably, it is a big issue. I've published an article on it. The key organiser, and RVM, and he interviewed him and identified him as the organiser, was a guy called Dean Hurlston. Now, he's had a AVO or whatever, personal safety intervention order, taken out against him by a counsellor in Melbourne for stalking and harassing her. So here he is having that intervention order taken out against him for stalking and harassing a female counsellor. During the course of the proceedings, the magistrate found it also stalked and harassed a number of other female employees of the councils down there in Melbourne. Being interviewed by R.V. Yemeni, who's a convicted wife beater, colluding to harass and stalk Grace Tame outside the ABC because they had the audacity to hire her for a 4-part podcast series on autism. It's absolutely ridiculous. Now, the magistrate said he had to, or she said had to issue the personal intervention order against Dean Hurlston because he'd harassed a councillor or mayor for 6 years. The magistrate said they needed to issue that order because it was likely that Hurlston would continue to do it. Well, he has continued to do it, harass someone, harass a woman, but he just changed targets to Grace Tame. And I wrote that in the article. So it's pretty disgusting how it's the same people that are colluding to harass Grace Tame. Now, Dean Hurlston tried to claim he was impartial. He wasn't Jewish at the rally in the video with R.V. Yemeni, but he's been on Sky News on a regular basis, who are part of the group that have been attacking Grace Tame relentlessly. So I think Sky News, there's probably a fair chance they've colluded with R.V. Yemeni as well for this fake protest. They were very quick to report what R.V. Yemeni was broadcasting, attacking Grace Tame. This Dean Hurlston has been on Sky News on a regular basis, and back in December he did an interview where he was criticising people who are supporting Palestine and defending Israel. So to try and claim he's some sort of independent person is just a total lie. He's in effect being paid by the Murdochs to do that because payment doesn't have to be cash. It can be quid pro quo, a favour for a favour. He's getting plenty of promotion for his anti-council website by Sky News. Here he is organising this protest, and one of the first people to report it was Sky News. So they were in on it without a doubt. So it's an organised attack on Grace Tame. I've written an article about it. It's gotten a lot of traction, and it's something that I think the government or the authorities, the police should investigate. Because if this was a bunch of Muslims stalking and harassing Jewish women, well, they'd be arrested and charged in world record time. But here we have people claiming to be Jewish. And I put that in the title, Australian Jews Stalk and Harass Grace Tame, because when Charlie Pickering came outside, he quickly identified himself as Jewish. He was talking to R.V. Yemeni, and he said words to the effect, "You would know," because he knew R.V. Yemeni claims to be Jewish. So they were trying to push the angle, this is a Jewish criticism of Grace Tame. So I put that in the title because they had identified as Jewish. But I wrote later very early in the article, I wrote, and I'll read it out verbatim, as you'll see from the evidence below in the article, it is almost certain that R.V. Yemeni, with the help of Australian Zionist Jews, such as Australian Jewish Association, set up the fake protest. So it was driven by the Zionist movement within Australia, but they're trying to make it a Jewish Grace Tame issue. I don't really believe it is. I think it's just a Zionist Grace Tame issue, but I put that in the heading because they're the ones trying to leverage off it, which they do on a regular basis. The Zionists trying to make it a Jewish issue, hide behind that. So that's pretty well where we're at there, Robert.
Shane, do you think it could have been an own goal? Because had this been let go and Grace Tame just did her articles on autism, no one would have noticed any difference. She's got an enormous following in Australia. She's a very, very popular person. So to attack her like this, I can see that it's going to be detrimental to the cause rather than assisting it, but it's clearly been well planned and well articulated to do it, but it could actually backfire on them.
Oh, it has backfired within a couple of days. That was on a Tuesday afternoon. I think it was the 2nd of June. By the Thursday, 4th of June, Charlie Pickering's backpedaling.
Yeah, I think
Uh,
that was a sign that they probably realised they'd gone a little bit too hard and too far.
well, no, I don't think it's them. I think you have to distinguish between Charlie Pickering and Avi Yemeni and the Zionists, the Australian Jewish Association, who are heavily involved because one of their key members was actually interviewed by Avi Yemeni outside the ABC at Melbourne. But Charlie Pickering, he'd just taken over and he started on Monday with a new radio, well, not a new radio show, but he's taken over that program at the ABC. And watching the video of him being interviewed by Avi Yemeni, he thought he was joining the crew. He thought he went outside and he's going to get some more listeners. He's going to be part of the crew. He gave them exactly what they wanted when said it was problematic with Grace Tame podcast series. But then Avi Yemeni turned on him, turned on him for being an ABC propagandist pushing propaganda. So he got burnt very quickly. And on Thursday, he was backpedaling, saying he was ambushed by Avi Yemeni and he would never do an interview with him, rah, rah, rah. Well, that's a big lie because you can see at the beginning of the interview he does with Avi Yemeni. He said, I just come outside to interview a few people. And Avi Yemeni said he wanted to interview him. Oh, we'll interview each other at the same time. And he pulls out his iPhone or phone, starts recording. That was Charlie Pickering, and Avi Yemeni had his microphone and cameraman there. So, no, he got burnt, Charlie Pickering, and by everyone, dug a huge hole for himself. So by Thursday, he's grovelling, in effect begging Avi Yemeni, who had begged him in the interview, ultimately. So that's where Charlie Pickering stood. He tried to, I suppose, thinking he was part of the in crew, then realised he got burnt very quickly, then started getting a hiding on social media for attacking Grace Tame, fellow ABC employee in effect. Well, Grace Tame's not actually an employee, but she was a contractor there doing that podcast series, obviously. So now that leaves us with Avi Yemeni and the Australian Jewish Association. Now it's backfired on them. Well, did it backfire on them? They don't really care. They just want to get publicity. They don't really care too much. So I don't know if it's backfired on them as such, uh, because they're the sort of person who just want to, people who want to just get out there and antagonise people to get
Mm.
their issue, to get a bit of publicity, and get that fringe who might support them aware of them and to come over. If they're going to upset 90% of the people, 95% of the people, they just don't care. That's part of their mode of operation. But it was interesting, the Australian Jewish Association, I promoted my article with a link on X, formerly Twitter, and a former member of the Australian Jewish Association started giving me lip, started attacking me in the comment section, only in a minor way. I responded. When I responded, dropping the boot into him, he had a conviction or a charge. He has a charge for choking, former charge. So I raised that and said, mate, it's a bit rich you commenting on this article about Grace Tame getting stalked and harassed, giving you have a choking charge. He started playing the victim. Oh, you're defaming me. Retract that. Which is not defamation because it's in an actual article. And I posted the actual article in my comment and said, is this you? Now, he's quickly backed off this morning and blocked me. So he was trying to play the victim, demanding I retract it, implying he'll institute defamation proceedings. Doesn't expressly say that, but that was the implication. When I didn't back off, I posted again this morning. I said, is Margaret Cunneen your lawyer? Because there's pictures of him with the barrister outside the court in the article. And I said, is Margaret Cunneen your barrister still? Can I contact her and ask her about the choking charges? Now, he's blocked me. The reason he got publicity because of that is because he actually ran for politics up here. So that made it a political issue. And that's why he got media coverage. In a charge, the average person would get no media coverage for choking, as simple as that. But because he was running for politics, he was known, he got some media coverage, and he was a former member, or quite potentially still a member, of the Australian Jewish Association. So you got those links of the Australian Jewish Association being interviewed by Avi Yemeni outside the ABC, one of their leaders. I can't remember his name. It's Shane something or other. Now, obviously, I remember the first name because that's my name, but he's actually in the video I've embedded in the article. Then you got another member or former member of the Australian Jewish Association attacking me on social media. So it's being coordinated out of there, without a doubt, their attacks, and that should leave everyone disturbed. As I say at the end of the article, the reason I did this article is because I was working on another article along similar lines. And when I do that other article, this sort of fits in with an ongoing campaign of certain elements of the Zionist community in Australia just stalking and harassing people, especially women, trying to silence them full stop, whether they've broken the law or not. Just if they've upset them, they decide, okay, we're going to silence them on a permanent basis. And that's the part about Grace Tame that you say it might have backfired. Well, it didn't backfire. They're trying to send a message, not just to Grace Tame, send a message to everyone. You say something we don't like, you upset us, whether it's legal or not, and it is legal, what Grace Tame said, it's not illegal. We're going to hound you and harass you for the rest of your life and drive you out of the media.
I suppose time will tell as to whether the tactic has worked, but I think attacking someone as popular as Grace Tame certainly is high risk, without doubt, because she's immensely popular across Australia, certainly with Australian women as being a leader of them. But adding to that, if the Zionist group clearly do undermine the credibility of strong women, that's consistent. In fact, it's almost consistent through the right side of Australian politics, which is very, very sad. But one of the first measurements, I suppose, will be when the radio ratings come out, and we'll see what effect it's had on Charlie Pickering's debut in that new time slot.
Oh, for sure, for sure. But you're saying it's high risk to go after Grace Tame. They've managed to, well, she reported when she said what she said, Globalised Intifada back in February, that her schedule, her bookings, she does talks, she's a public speaker, basically were wiped out for the next 12 months. So they did have an impact on her. So it is high risk, but it's high reward because that sends a message to everyone, hey, we'll wipe out your future. Now, I won't get into it too much, but where it did backfire badly for them is when they tried to silence a writer at the Adelaide Writers Festival, whose name escapes me at the moment. Now, that backfired badly for them because they closed down the whole Writers Festival, and her booking for the Sydney Writers Festival, her talks were sold out. And I think it was the same as the Newcastle Writers Festival. So they've actually promoted her, but she was less high. She wasn't as high profile as Grace Tame, not at the time at least, and she still wouldn't be. So I think it's high risk going after Grace Tame, but it's high reward for them if they can send that message, hey, we'll silence people. And that's why it's important to write articles like I've written, to shine a light on exactly what they're doing. I'm going to write another article on in the next few days, and then I'll also be putting submissions into the Royal Commission. I don't know if I'll have much luck at the Royal Commission. They don't seem to want to entertain alternative views except for the views of the Jewish community or the Zionist community. But I'll put it in submissions anyhow. You never know your luck. We'll see what happens there.
Well, that's interesting take, and it is a watch this space on that. AUKUS is still bubbling along, Shane. There's some issues popped up with the Greens in particular, and David Shoebridge really working away at the government policy. There's a bit of ducking and diving going on um, in that space at the moment. How have you seen that after we last spoke about it?
Well, I think the thing there is, and where it's very difficult, it's a big drag on the government, Albanese, the Labor Party. Um, they were basically handed a hand grenade by the former Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, and he pulled the pin when he lost the election in 2022. So Albanese, in effect, and I suppose that's an analogy, he's got a hand grenade in his hand with the pin pulled, and he can't drop it because it's just going to go off no matter what he does. Because he really needs to cancel AUKUS. It's nothing but a pathetic joke. Everyone says the same thing. There's no guarantees we'll ever get the submarines, and it's highly likely we won't. The Americans can't supply them except for second-hand submarines. And the UK, apparently, they can't supply the submarines they're meant to supply us as well. So it's highly improbable we'll ever get any. But the problem for Albanese is that if he cancels the AUKUS, people are going to say he's weak on defence. But if he keeps it going, it just becomes more and more of an embarrassment. One of the key issues that I've raised is the fact that it's really nothing but a huge slush fund for former politicians. You've got Joe Hockey, you've got Christopher Pyne, former WA Premier, whose name escapes me as well, Labor Premier. He's working for Joe Hockey's business, Bondi Partners, they call it. So Bondi Partners is just an organisation, a company set up for former politicians to cash in on AUKUS. They all hang around AUKUS with their snouts in the trough, trying to make money. I don't know how they make money. They just become the middleman, try and win contracts or something like that. I'm not too sure how they make money from it, but it's a $368 billion slush fund. Now, the big problem for Albanese is a so-called independent inquiry has been set up, headed by Peter Garrett, the former Labor politician, former anti-nuclear party leader. And that potentially is going to do a lot of damage to the Labor Party, Anthony Albanese, in AUKUS. Just help shine a light on what a failure it is. And the Greens have been driving it, especially David Shoebridge, Senator David Shoebridge. They've been driving a lot of the criticism. I think one of the biggest, and so has former Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull. So you've got a whole heap of people shining a light on what a joke it is. One of the biggest jokes is the fact that we've handed over billions of dollars. I think we're up to $8 or $10 billion now. Can't remember the last figure we've handed over. And if America and the UK don't produce any submarines for us, don't hand over any submarines, we don't get the money back. So there's no clawback. That's what's called a clawback. If you put down a deposit and you don't get your product, where you claw back the money that you've paid. There's no clawback with us. So that's just money that disappears, which is the most incompetent contracts you'd ever want to see. And that wasn't signed off on Scott Morrison. A lot of the Labor Party people are jumping up and down. Oh, it was Scott Morrison. We had no option. Well, Scott Morrison didn't negotiate the contract. Scott Morrison announced the AUKUS deal. But that was just a deal to negotiate a deal. The final deal was not finalised until March 2023 when Anthony Albanese flew over to the US and met with Joe Biden and the then UK Prime Minister. I can't think of his name either, Shinak or something.
Yeah.
So it wasn't finalised until March 2023. So the Labor Party trying to blame Scott Morrison. No. The dud deal was negotiated by Albanese and his government. The no clawback clause, that was negotiated by Albanese, signed off by him. The $368 billion price tag, I don't know where they got it from, but that was signed off and negotiated by Albanese and his government. They're 100% responsible. Can't blame Scott Morrison any further. Scott Morrison should be in jail over robo-debt. We all know that. So the fact that he's even out and about and commenting, he continues to comment on AUKUS. The fact that he's even out and about commenting on it, which is another embarrassment for the government, shows that it's got nothing to do with him anymore. Although he's trying to cash in on AUKUS as well with one of his appointments with some company. So they're all trying to cash in on AUKUS. A lot of dud politicians, former politicians. Just another headache for Albanese, and I think it's going to ultimately do a lot of damage to him because he's damned if he does, damned if he doesn't. And that's his fault. They should have never agreed to AUKUS in the first place. When they
Yeah.
got to power, they should have said, hey, okay. They never should have negotiated such a dodgy deal in the first place. That's
This
got
could
their
really
fingerprints
be
all over it.
this could be a real asset for independent and Greens politicians at the election, because currently, as polling shows, the three major parties, Liberal, Labor and One Nation, are all supporting AUKUS. So if this public sentiment that Peter Garrett is driving, plus the work that independent journalists like yourself do, if they raise public ire about this subject, it'll be interesting to see how it affects voting, because Labor and Liberal are in absolute lockstep on AUKUS. It's probably the only issue that they are in lockstep on, apart from reducing political donations to independents. So it's quite funny to see them friendly in this space when they're not really friendly anywhere else.
Well, the bottom line is, and I've been writing about AUKUS for a while. Well, I've been writing about the submarines. I'll give you an example. There's stuff with the submarines that no one else reports for whatever reason. If you wind the clock back a few years, when we had the $80 billion French submarine contract, a guy called David Gazzard. Now, they hadn't finalised the deal. Once again, it's one of those situations where Malcolm Turnbull announced the deal. There was no final contract. They just announced the deal before there's a final contract. And it was left to Scott Morrison's government to finalise the contract with the French. They're having troubles finalising the contract. So the French employ a guy called David Gazzard, who's Scott Morrison's best mate. They employ the best mate of the Prime Minister as a consultant to help negotiate the final contract. So his job is to slip in there and get some millions of dollars for himself. So anyhow, this David Gazzard, his consultancy firm, is hired by the French to help negotiating the $80 billion contract. How much he was paid, I'll never know. We'll never know, but it would have been millions. And who's a partner at his consulting firm? Former Treasurer Peter Costello, another good mate of Scott Morrison's. So all of a sudden, they're in the middle of this $80 billion contract, submarine contract, greasing their own palms to help finalise it. Now, Scott Morrison would have said to the French, look, we're having problems finalising this contract. Why don't you employ my mate? That's what would have gone down. I've written a number of articles about it. Now, at the time this French submarine contract blew up, it was done through a company called Thales, which is a French company, I think it was, the submarine defence contracting company. Criminal charges were laid against politicians in South Africa and Malaysia for taking bribes from Thales for submarine contracts. And I have no doubt that's part of the reason, probably the main reason the contract blew up, because Scott Morrison would have shit himself and said, oh, you got politicians in Malaysia and South Africa being charged for taking bribe from Thales for a submarine contract. I'm getting out of here. We're pulling the pin on that contract. I reckon very coincidental. That was in the media at the time he pulled the contract. No one could work out why he pulled the contract, especially when he's got his mates in there, Peter Costello and David Gazzard, skimming off some millions for themselves.
What do
It
they
was a
say,
total
Shane?
rort.
Follow the money.
So the whole thing, whether it be with Thales, with the French, or AUKUS now, with Bondi Partners, you want to have a look. People at home should Google Bondi Partners. Joe Hockey, you can see the company's website. You can see the former politicians, Labor and Liberal, on there as so-called consultants making money from AUKUS. And so they'll be lobbying Anthony Albanese hard not to ditch AUKUS, you'd think. Or maybe they made their millions, they want to get out now. Who knows? Maybe they'll say, yeah, ditch AUKUS, we've made our millions. Let's sweep that under the carpet and move on to the next gig. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes, and that's where Albanese's in big trouble. And it probably will cost him votes, as you said. It's a good issue for the Greens and the independents to drive. For whatever reason, they haven't been rising in the polls recently. I think they will closer to the election, but they haven't recently, and they could jump on the bandwagon and really drive this even harder than they have been, especially the Greens.
Yeah, something to follow is certainly the rise of One Nation at the moment, because they're appealing to grievance, but they're going to be challenged more and more between now and the election. They'll have to be more accountable about what they truly stand for and their policies, and it might be during this period where people who are aggrieved with the two-party system might see that One Nation isn't actually the way out. So a subject like AUKUS will play an important part in people's minds coming up to an election, I believe.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what happens with the independent inquiry. They've got Peter Garrett, Carmen Lawrence, former WA Premier, and she was a MP in the Labor government from memory. I don't know if she was a minister or at all, but she was definitely an MP, wasn't she, federally at
Yep,
one
yep,
stage, I thought.
that's
Um,
correct.
so it'll be interesting how that independent inquiry plays out. That could be a stick of dynamite again for Labor in the government. And ultimately, who knows, if they dig deep enough and they start looking at Joe Hockey and his company making millions out of it, could end up being very embarrassing for the Liberal Party as well.
Yeah, look, there's no doubt. I think if people are really keen to make sure their vote is valued and they start to research more, and I think it's again another feather in the cap to the work that you and other independent journalists do to highlight these things that otherwise would not come out in the media. They're well and truly hidden away, but the work you do digging them out. So, and a bit of a shout out to people to support the work that you're doing.
Thanks.
Yeah, right, that's probably time to wrap things up. Shane, thank you very much. People can obviously find your website, Kangaroo Court of Australia, and people can find me on 94.7 The Pulse Community Radio in Geelong on a Wednesday morning. Just Google 947thepulse.com.
And you also got your website, robertcameron.net.au.
Yes, that's a good way to find some of the previous interviews and discussions that we've had on the station. So thank you for the opportunity to spend some more time with you, Shane.
Thanks a lot, Robert, and we'll talk next time. Thank you for watching the second episode of the Kangaroo Court Uncut podcast. And as I said at the beginning, I've been running a campaign to help fund the Kangaroo Court of Australia website, YouTube channel, now this podcast. That does cost money, and I'm a full-time independent journalist. And I'll read out the campaign details, and please support if you can. 28 weeks ago, I launched a campaign with a simple goal: find 200 new monthly supporters so I can keep doing this work as a fully independent journalist running this website and YouTube channel, now podcast, without corporate backing or paywalls. Since then, 177 wonderful people have stepped up and become monthly supporters. That's huge. Thank you. We're now at 23 to go. If you've been enjoying the work and aren't yet supporting monthly, I'd be incredibly grateful if you'd consider joining them. Here's the situation. Like most independent journalists, I'm basically a one-person small business. Right now, a lot of us are feeling the squeeze, just like many small businesses and households are. Stay afloat and keep bringing you the reporting I do. I need roughly 200 more people, well, 23 more people now, chipping in wherever they can comfortably afford each month. Anything from $3 to $100 or whatever works for your budget makes a real difference. There's no lock-in. You can cancel or adjust at any time. If that feels doable right now, you can see all the donation options on the donations page on my website. I'll put a link to the donations page below this video on YouTube. Your support, whether it's a monthly donation or one-off donation, or just sharing my work, what helps keep independent voices like this one alive. And please do your bit and help shine a light on corruption and share this video on social media. And please hit the like and subscribe button and notification button. That way you get notified when I publish new videos. Other than that, thank you for your time and have a good day.